Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for
Up, up and away in my beautiful balloon. UnSpun.
Bravo.
Thank you so much.
Shout
Thank you.
out to our former editor-in-chief at the Orca, McLean K. He will love that. He loves it when you sing. He loves it when you sing. So why are you singing about balloons?
Oh, I don't know why. I just can't figure it out. What would I be singing about? Oh, wait, because we keep shooting them out of the sky?
Yeah. Interesting too how it has activated the UFO conspiracy theorists. And it was funny. I saw
Yeah.
Professor Timothy Caulfield, who debunks conspiracy theorist garbage, had put out there, listen, if aliens were coming here, they wouldn't be coming in balloons. They're just not. But interesting though how much we learned about NORAD and the balloon that showed up, I think it was the third or fourth, whatever, the high altitude object that activated and showed how the US and Canada actually work together. Because I think we're going to talk a lot more about the North and when Russia is done with whatever they're doing in Ukraine, they're coming for us.
China wants it, Russia wants it, Norway wants it, Sweden wants it. Everybody wants. If Denmark wants it because of Greenland, everybody wants the North, and it's.
I like how the Danes and the Canadians go back and forth with the flags and the leaving of cocktails, and at least we've got a way of fighting over stuff that's dignified to some degree. Let's talk about less infighting in City Hall. Let's start with municipal, if you don't mind, this week on our 30 minutes, the fastest 30 minutes in BC politics.
Yeah.
And actually not even in City Hall. Let's start in the park board.
Your precious park board. Your precious little park board.
Option C.
Precious little option C. Option C with changes. So how dare you get rid of a bike lane? How dare you? What do you think?
There's a bike lane there.
Oh my God.
There's still a bike lane.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Bike lane that goes all the way around the park.
The bike lane hates bike lanes.
The bike lane couldn't be safer all the way around a seawall. I had somebody tweeting at me how they're, the seawall's unsafe. And I'm like, the seawall just at Stanley Park is unsafe, or the whole seawall that goes all the way around the city? Because I would argue that there are other parts of the seawall that are much busier than Stanley Park, and no one's screaming about extra bike lanes around them. Right. Like, it's just like, and it came back at me, and I don't know who the person is, and I don't need to reference them specifically, but it got down there. There's so little to defend now. It's so small that it actually came down to, my 8-year-old doesn't feel confident enough on their bike on the seawall in Stanley Park. We need that lane. And I'm like,
your 8-year-old can't go up that hill. This argument about kids one is bully poop.
We're not building a lane for small children in the park, guys. The people that are freaking out about this lane are the people that used it as a velodrome. They're the people who used to race around it because it was convenient for them to just go into the park and race around on the road. Why don't we call it what it is? The people with the little cycling guys in their emoticons. These are the people that, and you have educated me so much. I do get fired up over this subject because I believe it's not actually the argument that people are trying to make. It's environmental. Like, oh my gosh, we are failing in our climate emergency because we're pulling out the bike lane in Stanley Park. Seriously? No, that is lobby agenda garbage.
Yeah, it's hey, if you're forcing people, first of all, on the environment, if you're making people idle cars longer in the park because they're stuck in traffic, that's not good for the environment. If you're forcing people to go to parks that are further away because they can't get into the park, or they feel like, oh, well, I can't get to the park anymore with my kids or my grandmother or whatever, I'm going to go to drive to Burnaby from Yaletown instead, because what's the point of going to Stanley Park? That's not good for the environment. So that argument is moot. This is what we've talked about since this whole fiasco, this show started. Process, right? And I know it's boring, and sometimes there's too much process and things, but zero process is never good. And this previous park board, had zero process for this these bike lanes. They really just threw it in there as a Green Cope Left Wing Alliance that said bike lanes are great. It was during the pandemic when, whatever, we were all living our different lives, and they just rammed it through. If you ask any competent transportation engineer, they would say to you and look at that, go, because if you look at, there's all this worry about the beach bike lane, which is designed and properly separated, and there's traffic flow structure for it. It's really nice bike lane. It's very well used. It makes sense. There's still 2 lanes. We lost a lot of parking there, but you can get now down to the parking lot. There's, it's built in a way that makes sense, because they took their time and then voted on it and debated it in council, and it got passed and it got built. The park board portion of that, a bunch of cones randomly there, half the time lying down because they've been knocked over by whatever, wind or cars or whatever. They rented cones, by the way, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Fortune.
No facilitation or concept of working with the businesses or anybody in the park that uses,
or the safety of people that are anywhere in that park. It was hard enough with 2 lanes to get around that park for emergency vehicles. And with the higher population of people that would have attended a park like that during a pandemic, I wouldn't I wouldn't take my small child to the pool at Third Beach. I wouldn't. Or is it Second Beach? Now I'm second guessing myself. It's been so long since I've been there. Second Beach pool.
Yes.
But I literally don't go there. Yeah. Right, but I can't go to the pools anyway because I can't get a reservation at the pool. Also, how they screwed things up at the park board. I hope that we get our parks back to the way they were before that agenda group came in and stopped mowing lawns and stopped fixing infrastructure and lost all the parking revenue in our biggest generator, so that we can't afford to have lifeguards. Because that whole argument, by the way, summer's coming, guys. Summer's coming. We're going to need all the staff at the lifeguards. Let's start that in February so that we have enough people for May, so that we can open these pools back wide open to the people who use them regularly. It's unbelievable how poorly this was all run. And what a relief to see common sense land on the table. And the backlash is significant, but it'll end. Because these loud,
it's golden no for the left in the next election. They'll paint ABC as the anti-bike lane party for sure. So that works. That works. It worked against the NPA for a long time. So they have to be careful. They better make sure that new bike lane is built before the end of the next campaign, because before the next campaign starts, because and they will, because it shouldn't take that long. Here's the other thing about this: you talk about revenue, the parking revenue loss, but also, if you actually do the process properly, you can actually take money out of capital funding. There's 2 budgets that Park Board and City has. One is operating, one is capital. The way they were doing it, it was like a mess of financing. They're renting these cones. That has to come out of operating. Instead of building it properly using capital money that is set aside through developer donations and all the other donations. There's money. Park Board has millions and millions and millions of dollars sitting just waiting to be used. But it has to be capital. So if you say we want to build a bike lane, it's going to be separated. Here's the design. There's going to be concrete barriers here and plants here, and we're going to put trees over here. That's a capital expense. So that's, it doesn't come out of the operating unless you're borrowing money for the capital. So it's a different hit on the park board. So they took all this money from their operating, so they couldn't pay for lifeguards. They couldn't pay for proper maintenance. They couldn't the danger of fire in our parks. Imagine if Stanley Park would have burned down because it didn't have proper maintenance and they weren't taking care of the trees and the undergrowth.
Have you seen the trees in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like these are the things that they neglect. Is risky.
Mess.
When you talk about the environment, okay, well, if the entire Stanley Park burns down, how's that for the environment? I mean, really? Come on. Like common sense in its most absolute simplest way is what this is for sure.
And there's so much to the planning piece, because like the backlash to we're going with option C. We're going to take out the temporary. Then you said very few things that are called temporary remain temporary. Temporary bike lane in Stanley Park that was only going to be temporary. It was just then it was extended, then it was and then it was more permanent. That was going to be permanent. And now the freak out is there are going to be people driving around Stanley Park and cutting through and taking that exit onto the Lionsgate Bridge. Okay, well that's totally separate. Close that. Close that spot.
During the summer most of the time.
Exactly, George. But that's the
thing. But you know what?
They're just
I've done that tour. I sometimes will take that when you're coming off Lionsgate Bridge and you're heading home. I live in Yale Town. Sometimes I'll take that little route up there, and it's a really beautiful drive through that side of the park to drive home that way. Especially if it's like at dusk. It's really
Gorgeous.
lovely.
Sunset.
So
Yeah,
why
I'm
are you
with you.
depriving me of that? Oh, I'm sorry, I own a car.
I'm
But
an electric
come
car.
on.
Does my
Anyways,
electric car count?
yes, all cars
Thank you.
count.
Okay, I want to talk about a couple of other things that count. Number one, because we're just talking about cars and streets and bike lanes and what have you, the street cleaning note that went out this week, I thought of you when I saw the ABC, because,
Yeah.
okay, so for all of the time that George, you and I, and for anybody who watches or listens to this podcast, 205 episodes in, by the way, knows that we've spent a lot of time asking for the basics, right? Sewage, street cleaning,
Mm-hmm.
keeping our parks clean, doing the things that make filling potholes, putting in curb cuts, like making it livable and usable for all people in our city, our taxes, upkeep of our communities, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited at the concept of cleaning streets. I never thought I'd say that. I must be getting old. But it has been really brutal this last while. Like, where did it
So over
stop?
50,
Like,
so
who?
since 2011, 2008, when Vision got in, the first thing they did, the market crashed. They cut the street cleaning budget by 30% then. That was one of the major cuts they took on at that stage because of the financial challenge the city was in. They thought at that time,
Right.
instead of just raising taxes, which they did anyways, they cut budgets like that and then increased budgets like, build a new website for $25 million or whatever they spent. But they cut the street cleaning budget by 30%. It took us 10 years to get it back to that same number that it was in 2008. So when you
10
think about
years.
inflation,
Yeah, how much
the
would that have
budget by
cost differently?
2018, when I left, was now equal to what it was in 2008. And so therefore not equal because, of course, things have gotten more expensive. So
Yeah.
in effect, a significant decrease. It should be going up by 5 to 10% per year over that time. So really the budget should have gone up in that 10 years by 50%, if not more, for that. And it's not a huge budget. So the engineering department is very efficient. Unlike, planning and other departments, there's pay as you go. There's, they have a very efficient system and there's not a lot of places to cut. When you cut, you're cutting services. You can't,
Right.
the engineering department, it is what it is. It's what it costs. It's street cleaning and streets and sidewalks and whatever. You cut it, you lose it. It's not like there's an alternative. So it's good to see that that's coming back. It's still probably not enough, and you probably still won't see a huge impact because we're so far behind now.
We're so far behind.
Even though
we're far behind, but even the graffiti announcement and the rejuvenation in Chinatown plan,
Granville.
Granville, and just there's so, what? We spent the bulk of the last number of years, even in a pandemic, talking about letter writing campaigns. And now we're actually talking about actionable things.
Strongly worded letter.
Oh my gosh, right? But then this ABC, and you can agree with the politics or not, right, left, center, whatever. At least there's some things that are actually happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you got to be aggressive. We talked about this in the past, and politics in general. There's a whole 100-day thing. But in your first year, you want to do all the aggressive things. So Park Board, in their case, that bike lane, they'll probably do some other things. And then in year 2 of a 4-year term, you start giving stuff back. That's going to make people really happy. And so those going back to the bike lanes. Okay, so likely by year 3, there'll be a new bike lane in Stanley Park, and there'll probably be other the Granville Bridge will be finished. That'll be a big bike lane on Granville Bridge. There'll be
awesome.
Kids will have a new bike lane. These are all coming. They've all been approved. And so it'll be hard to argue against the party that's against, they say it's against bike lanes.
When they're all popping up all over the place.
Yeah. But you think about street cleaning and you think about, what's shocking to me is that when Vision was elected in 2008, the budget was around 700 million per year, the operating. Now it's 1.8 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, do you get $1.8 billion worth more in the city than or $1 billion more of services in the city than you did in 2008? I don't think so. I don't see it.
No. In fact, I get nickeled and dimed to the point of another. You already said shit earlier, so I'm going to say bullshit cup of coffee here. Yes. Our bullshit cup of coffee would cost, more in the name of being environmental, and then doesn't go anywhere, doesn't go back to, doesn't stop anything, just lines the pockets of the people that were giving us the cups before. And don't get me wrong, I'm down with what will actually move the meter. I would like to see meaningful change come to our environmental awareness and our,
Sure.
use of our own, you just used your mug, not using a paper cup or
We were doing
using
that
something
before.
that is, we were doing that before. I'm so glad that this cup fee has gone the way of the dodo.
I think the bag one should go too, but
I agree.
I think that
I agree.
you know how many plastic bags I buy now? I
Do you
never
know how many
bought plastic bags.
reusable bags? I have a box full of them.
And
A
cotton. It's such a
box
lovely
full of
material.
them.
I know.
Yeah.
And I
Made of
now buy
plastic.
plastic bags to shop that I keep in my pocket that I would have
Yeah.
used, recycled those plastic bags. So the plastic bag one, I think it's got to go. Straw one, whatever. I mean, okay, fine, keep that one. But the bag one is ridiculous. You know, if you go to McDonald's, they charge you 25 cents for a bag. And if you say no, they still give you a bag.
They give it to you anyway, but they just don't charge you the 15 cents or whatever it is. My goodness. Hey, speaking of money, let's move to this one because you with Curve Communications and your former incarnation of doing so much for the P&E before going your own way. You've done a billion events. Billion with a BI.
Yeah, no, Laura Balance and I used to be partners, and we P&E, boat show, auto show, motorcycle show. Did a lot of shows, a lot of cultural events over the years. That's my agency sort of evolved a lot since then, but certainly understand the challenges that that events. And if you're an event marketing company over the last 3 years, you were challenged. But if you're an event,
no kidding.
the auto show didn't come back again this year for the 4th year in a row, I think. So what's the announcement? There's a big announcement coming.
The announcement is happening while we're talking right now, but it's an injection of cash. Lana Popham has dedicated a chunk of money to help with the struggles that have been real for events like the auto show, boat show,
certainly the
P&E, the Squamish Constellation, the Cherry Blossom Festival. That was basically, in dire straits because of that developer that we talked about last week was their title sponsor. And so that's what we're seeing. Everybody's like tightening up as what happens when inflation hits and they're, whether a recession is the right term or not, but when people start to be like, these things suffer and we need community events. We need community. We need to be doing these. I'm so grateful that the decision was made somewhere by someone to keep the Folk Fest going. Like I talked about loving that event, and it's one of those ones that's not, feeling like it's just another corporate reason. It's the other way around.
Why they can't survive. They don't get the corporate donors.
Right, but it's one of those places, like as a kid or as a young person going there, taking your kid there, it feels like the magic without it being.
Get your best hippie wardrobe on, and
I love that. But I wrote a column about I loved going to Playland or the P&E back in the day when I was a teenager, when I was my son's age. That was a place where we could roam free. And I remember early days of playing the whack-a-mole game and just spending most of my money and most of my time giggling my head off with my friends playing the whack-a-mole game for 15 cents a play or whatever it is. Well, now it's $5 a play, but everybody wins. So nobody plays against anybody, because if you play all by yourself, you're going to win one of those cheap whatever. And I was like, this bugs me, because it feels like we have to make this much in order to do this. So it sucks the fun out of it. And I've talked to Laura Balance about this because I don't think she really liked that column that I wrote. But I was like, but the reason why I'm so pissed at that is because I love it so much and I miss what it was, right? And I want kids of all socioeconomic levels to be able to enjoy our festivals, our events, and what have you. It shouldn't just be for wealthy people, like movie theaters. AMC saying that they're going to charge more for the good seats within a theater. Like if you don't have enough money, you got to sit in the front row and crank your neck like this. I'm like, that's garbage.
It's like the Globe for Shakespeare.
Garbage.
Like Shakespeare, you got to stand up there in the cheap seats.
Yeah. Standing room only. Anyways, I'm my bit of a rant there, but I want the injection from the government because I think that's tax dollars well spent if it doesn't just line the pockets of the people who are making money off the events to prop that part up. I hope it creates more of an environment where putting on such an event is meaningful and there is return, because of course people need to make money from doing the job, right? And the P&E, yes. But the P&E employs so many young people, and that is the other side of it. Like,
I told Quinn wants to work there this summer, and I said, do you know what the job you're going to get? Yeah, I don't know. I said, probably doing garbage. He said, oh. I said, yeah, you don't even like touching. He's like a bit of a germ phobe, It isn't like, I'm a bit of a germ phobe myself, germaphobes, don't touch door
Yeah.
handles, things like
Don't
that.
touch
Doesn't explain
the
why I get
railing on
sick.
the escalator.
Exactly. Don't ever
Yeah,
touch
right.
those.
You've been sick for
But
3 weeks,
I'm thinking
dude.
you're gonna have to dig deep into those garbage cans at the P&E. You sure you want to do
Yeah.
that? But
I got
great jobs
my son's been
for
a
14 to
dishwasher.
50, 15 year olds.
Yep. My 15-year-old has been a dishwasher for the last 6 months. Boy, I tell you, he has learned the muck.
Ugh, I
The
did
muck
that. I
is
did that.
ooh. Yeah.
Dishwashing.
He
That's
keeps
how I got
saying
out
he
of
wants to quit. And I'm
gardening.
like, get another job. I'll let you quit. But not
Yeah.
until you get another job.
I
Okay,
went
let's
from
talk about
gardener to
budgets.
grill to dishes to grill cook, just so I wouldn't have to do gardening because I thought, oh, I got to get inside. Dishes, that
Yeah.
sounds it's got to be easier than doing gardening in the middle of pouring rain.
I've been dish
But yeah,
pit. I've
dish
done
pit.
dish pit. I worked at KFC. I worked at Dairy Queen. I worked at, Earl's. I
See
worked in the
pride in
kitchen
those
at
clean
Earl's.
dishes.
I did. I
Yeah.
actually got into it. I zened out. But back then we didn't have, funky earphones and a nonstop
No,
Spotify list. Like we
that's
actually had to just do it.
yeah.
Okay. Snap election. We talked about that last week as well.
Yeah.
Provincially speaking,
Oh,
David-Eby just keeps saying out loud, I'm
hmm.
not doing that.
Let me refer back to just a brief conversation we just had about Lana Poppin announcing a whole bunch of money. I mean, these are the kind of things you don't announce if you're not thinking about an election. He's going to come up with a budget that's probably going to be a nice little either break even or potentially nice, revenue positive budget for next year. He's going to have a bunch more goodies. I know he keeps saying it, but seriously, I mean, every politician says they're not going to call an election. He'll call an election when he thinks it makes the most sense to win, and that's totally his call. And
Yeah.
he knows that right now he could probably win no problem, and that is very, very tempting. And the people behind the scenes that are going to be pushing him hard to do that, I would be very surprised if there's not an election this year. Very surprised.
Okay, let's save this clip. Speaking of surprises, nice segue. Hello, Toronto Mayor
Yeah.
John Tory. Friday evening, I was just flipping around and I stopped at CBC News Network and I went and I was doing something else.
Classic Friday night announcement.
Buried on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, what? And then I hit it just in time for him to walk up to the podium and announce that he was resigning because the Toronto Star had the goods that he had been having an affair with one of the people on his staff who's 31-year-old woman who he's been very careful to protect, but basically saying, I'm resigning because I'm going to go apologize to my family until they forgive me or whatever. And he's like, respect our privacy and mine, and walked away. And I was like, oh, okay.
To be honest, I find that, unless Toronto's in a different world than I in Canada, I always thought that those kinds of scandals don't really matter to most Canadians. And then in an urban center like Toronto, I'd be surprised that would make a big difference. I feel like that he just didn't want to do the fight, but he wasn't up for the challenge of, going through that process, because generally in these kinds of scandals, most people go, oh yeah, well, I mean, the fact that it's an HR challenge is another, but she's not going that route. This person, as far as I understand, she's moved on to other things. Worked there anymore.
Yeah.
So it's not that. It's just that it had been uncovered, which is, I just find that's all kind of gross. I really don't care.
Think
I don't
in
care
the follow-up,
to
it, it would appear that John Tory's wife has said, that's it. We're done here. Yeah. Like, you stop that and get back into the family and make it up to us. Or I think, and I don't have that clearly, I don't have that direct from her, but from what I have garnered in information gathering from reputable outlets, it sounds like he wants to save his marriage. And these are the steps that have been laid out for him to do that. Less of a political move, other than because the budget was being tabled this week. His budget was yesterday, and everybody was worried, pandemic, upheaval, so much going on, healthcare system struggles, greenbelt struggles from the provincial level, and how that lands on the mayor's desk. A much celebrated mayor, 3-term mayor, wins in a landslide. There's a whole bunch about this. would he be there for the budget? Is the budget, everybody's worked really hard on this, as you talk about. There are many people behind the scenes who put the work in on this stuff.
Yeah.
This isn't one person,
No,
but the
no,
perception being
not
what it
city
is.
budgets. Yeah.
And then he's there yesterday and a woman starts ranting and raving and freaking out and yelling and disrupting everything. It's like, okay, all right. Like he had an affair, consensual affair. And you know what? There's a lot that's wrong with that, right? There's a lot that's wrong with
You
that.
can judge that if you want. Yeah,
But
people can judge it
for
as an ethical, but is it a political thing?
Is it a cancel culture worthy thing?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And so I think there's, maybe it was his wife laid down the law. He just really want to focus on that, but he also could have just waited whatever his term out. But I can imagine how that would be very embarrassing. And he seems like a very conservative guy. This I think is more surprising thing. John Tory, really? Okay. Yeah. And I think that even he's probably going, this is not my style to be in this kind of awkward situation. I don't mind talking about money and politics, but talking about my sex life, no, I'm not going there. So that might have been it as well. It's just like, you know what? I don't like this job that much. So bye. And I think that might be part of it. Having been in politics, you sort of go, sometimes, exiting is, good. The best time is the best time. You're like, okay, I'm done with this. It's not a fun world. You're exposed. And if you add in that kind of situation, you're constantly being, I used to go to, Canadian Tire and people would walk up to me and start asking me or saying things, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And, you sort of like, it's fine. But if you multiply that by 10 or 20, it can be annoying or intimidating or scary or sometimes a very ego stroking if it's the right stuff. Usually it's not. Usually it's pretty negative when people come up to you.
But I think there's
come up and say, I love you, you're amazing.
But being vulnerable, being exposed in that way is not for everyone, which is why, people who might be exceptional leaders don't, because they're like, yeah, no, I don't want that. I don't want to, because I remember you telling me this when you were running for election and saying, or was it when people expected you to run and you didn't, but they already had a smear campaign ready for you?
Yeah, they did.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah,
where I was
there was an assumption I was going to run for mayor in 2018 and 14, actually, but 18 especially. And I had bowed out in early 2018 or late 2017. I can't remember. And then I've learned that they had been collecting information about me. Pretty boring, I would say, but they, mostly stuff that I would say in council, which if you look back, you could find stuff out of context. I talked about racism for a while when we were doing the empty homes tax, and I would bring up stuff then that I thought, these were racist, a lot of racist based policies being developed. And, you could take this and extract it and turn it into a real negative. Like if you wanted to, you can pull clips and make it, the American style more than anything. But I think there was a rumor, I will say, that there was stuff that had been collected of clips of me saying things that could be construed
against you.
Quite weird. And I was I'm not I have a challenge sometimes shutting up.
I think you're great. And people that, what, I'll tell you this, George, you're one of those people who, and I think you and I are very similar. We're very different, but we're very similar in that there are people who absolutely love us and there are people that come at us, right? But if somebody's coming at you and says, oh yeah, George, I consider them. I look at them and I'm like, okay, well, that tells me who you are because I know George, right? Do I agree with everything you say? Absolutely not. But I like you as a person. I feel like you're, 205 episodes of this in. We're family now. You can't get rid of me. We miss each other when we go on vacation. It's weird. We're like the work wife and husband, all due respect to Amanda. Hi, Amanda. But, consider the source when somebody slags George-Affleck. So if you ever running again.
I think any politician, any human, I think, because, you can be really, really aware of your person and your personality, I suppose. But even when you are, I know how I can be sometimes.
Sure.
But when people tell you how much they hate you, you're like, really? I'm not that bad. You hate me? Why?
I like coming in and saying, hey, just so you know, I'm a lot. I'm a lot.
I'm a lot.
You just follow me on Twitter and you can find out just how much. At Jody Vance. Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. And you are at George_Affleck. At George_Affleck. Of course, unspunpodcast.com is where you just sign up. So this hits your inbox every Thursday. I'm going to be doing Steele and Vance as I do on Thursday, so make sure you tune into that. We also repeat on Sundays on Check at 4 o'clock, which is kind of a cool catch-up time for some people. If your midweek's busy, Linda Steele and I watch the news for you and sort of unpack it in a local way.
Thank
so
you.
I dig that. Yeah, but if you follow along on Twitter, and the reason why I bring up Steele and Vance is last week we had a conspiracy theory debunker, as I mentioned off the top, right? Professor Timothy Caulfield. Professor Caulfield at the University of Alberta. He's a health law professor. And he's the guy that came after like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop saying no. And then it became, don't do the cleanse diet. So, and now it's been, because conspiracy theories have grown in such a huge way, he talks about vaccinations and disinformation.
Cue ironic twist to this story when, of course, you started getting attacked by those same conspiracy theorists.
Right. Who had not watched the segment, but just decided, I'm coming at. And Professor Caulfield had literally done the segment on classic, predictable, 100%. There is a list that will tell you who the conspiracy theorists will be. And they all populated my Twitter feed. It was wild. It was just like, oh my God, you guys are proving him right. Bizarro land. Nice. But anyways, it ended up riling up just this, the seedy underbelly of people that probably would have been some who would come up to you and start yelling at you at Home Depot. So, I just thank them. I thank them for the free rent, and I thank them for the free advertising, because they retweeted the shit out of me. Thanks, guys.
And on that note, we're definitely getting an E.
Block.
They're getting E for 3 chats. You block people. I don't block people. I mute them, but I don't block them. But yeah, you get a lot of people that are pretty aggressive. You go at them. I tend to just go meh, but
But I like
you go at them.
I respond because I get DMs or sidebar comments from people thanking me for doing that, giving them the strength to do that in their private life.
You're their voice for those.
Care.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's taken 7 years, but the man who felt it was necessary to criminally harass me online on March the 10th will be entering a guilty plea. So I will update more on that on the other side of it. But having seen that all the way through, I did a post saying that that's happening, because it is. Mm-hmm. It's happening on March the 10th. And that post, right when all the conspiracy theorists and the hub people were like coming at me, and I was like, just so you know, this is actually, I'm seeing this to the end, and this guy's going to have his punishment, whatever that might be. And we're going to start moving towards better and more meaningful, swift consequences for people who would harass others online, because it's not a right to harass someone. That tweet, last I checked, was at 230,000 impressions. And then all of a sudden the nastiness slowed on my Twitter feed. So you know what? I'm going to keep fighting the good fight on that. Just like you're going to fight the good fight, holding politicians to account.
Or you may hear some new things coming from my end on politicians coming up soon. We'll keep you informed on that. Some interesting changes to the world I live in. I'll tell you more about that in the coming weeks.
We're going to get the scoop here, right? UnSpun podcast.
Sure, you bet.
Okay, see you later. You've got to tell me. As soon as we stop recording, you're telling me. Okay, go.
Bye.